All right, so now we're getting into one of our bubble cases, our first bubble case. We're doing it alphabetically. So we start off with the A's, Bobby Abreu. He's a guy. He got 5.5% of the vote last year, his first year.
Just
So
fractions away from falling off the ballot.
literally 0.6% away from falling off the ballot. And I think he should be getting more consideration. I'm not saying that he is or isn't a Hall of Famer quite yet. But you got to take a look at his on the surface stats. So on the surface, he has a 60.2 B WAR and a 59.8 F WAR. Not much differentiation. 41.6 peak WAR, which they take the best 7 years in terms of wins above replacement. They add them up, and it basically kind of tells you, how dominant you were in your prime. And his peak WAR was 0.8 below the average Hall of Fame right fielder, which, that's the average Hall of Fame right fielder, not, the baseline. That's the average Hall of Fame right fielder. So that's a good sign for him. Abreu also, his quadruple slash line was 291, 395, 475, 870, with a 120 OPS plus and a 129 weighted runs created plus. Baseball Reference has him at 28% above the average hitter. Fangraphs has him at 29% above the average hitter. And he did all that in 10,081 plate appearances, which is a considerable amount. Not a lot of guys get to that point. He also had 2,470 hits, 1,476 walks, 288 home runs, 400 stolen bases, and 574 doubles. And in the playoffs, if you want to consider that, because I know, a lot of guys make a big Hall of Fame case like in the playoffs. He only had 79 plate appearances in the playoffs, and he had a 284 average and 810 OPS. So it doesn't really play that much of a factor. So what do you see based off of on the surface statistics with Bobby Abreu?
I mean, it's hard not to notice the home run production with the stolen base production.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, Bobby Abreu was always a guy that just fell far, far, far under the radar, and that's continuing on the Hall of Fame ballot. So I'm glad that we're getting this opportunity to shine some light. I know a lot of people on baseball Twitter have been doing so. On the surface, the home runs, the walks, especially. I just pulled up this list. There are 8 players in Major League history to have 200 doubles, 400 stolen bases, and 500 doubles. They are Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson, Craig Biggio, Bobby Abreu, Johnny Damon, Paul Molitor, Jimmy Rollins, and Roberto Alomar. So that's a pretty decent list. Most of those guys are Hall of Famers, or Barry Bonds, which we know why he's not in the Hall of Fame, and it's not because of his numbers.
Yeah. 200 home runs, 400 stolen bases, 500 doubles.
Mm-hmm.
Very good combination.
Yeah.
So yeah, on the surface, very 60 Baseball Reference WAR, 2,400 hits, 1,400 walks, pretty big deal. And yeah, 400, 288 home runs, 400 stolen bases, pretty big deal. So I guess so, and other things, he was a 290 lifetime hitter, had a 395 lifetime on base percentage, which is very, very good. But also, I guess what should be considered is he played in possibly the most offensive era ever. But also, a lot of that was due to performance enhancing drug use coming up.
He was not an alleged user, is he?
I looked it up. I don't think he is.
Okay.
I don't think there's any allegations against him. I think he just kind of flies under the radar. So some comparisons that I have, very specific comparisons. Maybe, you could debate how accurate it is, how, the context of it all. So he has 60.2 B WAR in 10,000 plate appearances. So took a look at all the players who had between 58 and 62 B-WAR in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. So there's Todd Helton, who's on the ballot, Jack Beckley, who is a dead ball era Hall of Famer, Willie Davis, who did not make the ballot, but he had a career 723 OPS. So a lot of the guys, if you have a spectacular defensive career, but not a very good offensive career, you just won't get that attention. Bobby Abreu is not one of those guys. Gary Sheffield is another guy between 58 and 62 B-WAR in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. He's on the ballot and would likely be a Hall of Famer already, if not for alleged steroid use. There's also Harmon Killebrew, who's a Hall of Famer. Obviously, he had 573 home runs. Zach Wheat, who is a Hall of Famer. Ichiro Suzuki, who will be a Hall of Famer for sure. Vladimir Guerrero, who's a Hall of Famer. Darrell Evans, who is a first ballot drop. So I guess you can see the consistency here with the writers. Sammy Sosa, who would be a guaranteed Hall of Famer if not for steroids. And John Olerud, who was a first ballot drop, Hall of Very Good, and I would say fell off very quickly because of a lot of the reasons Abreu is not getting much traction now, because he played in an era of greatness where there were a lot of great hitters and his greatness didn't quite get recognized. So anything eye-popping to you based off of this?
I mean, I see a lot of guys other than Abreu that should have gotten more consideration. The biggest one being Dwight Evans. John Olerud is someone who I highlighted as pretty much the definition of Hall of Very Good. I wish he wasn't a first ballot drop. I'm not saying he should be a Hall of Famer, but I do wish he got some more consideration. And obviously, there's a couple guys, currently on the ballot. Helton, Sheffield, Sosa, guys like that. So, I mean, I think this speaks a little bit more about the other guys and not so much Abreu, but it's certainly not bad company to be in.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we get a feel for it, and it tells you that, like, historically, like we haven't had wins above replacement this entire time. So, guys have mostly been looking at home runs, hits, how you looked on the field, a lot of that stuff. So now, the last comparison thing I will do with the filters. So I have a list of players that had between a 125 and 130 OPS plus in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. And this is where we see a lot more Hall of Famers, players between 125 and 130 OPS plus, which means you're a very good hitter, I guess you would say, and between 9,000 and 11,000 plate appearances, of course. So you got Roberto Clemente, who's the headliner of that list. He's a Hall of Famer, of course. Ron Santo, he's a Hall of Famer. Robinson Cano, who would be a future, we mentioned him early in the episode, would be a future, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer, if not for the PED use. Dwight Evans, who dropped off after 3 ballots and was brought back in an alternate ballot, didn't quite make it, but there's a very good case that he should have made it.
Absolutely should have.
Goose Gosselin,
not to be confused with Goose Gossage.
Yeah, this guy played in the 20s. He was a Hall of Famer. Jack Beckley, who we mentioned before, dead ball era Hall of Famer. Zach Wheat, Hall of Famer. Sammy Sosa, guaranteed Hall of Famer if not for steroids. John Olerud, who we went over before. Willie Keeler, who's a dead ball era Hall of Famer. George Sisler, who's a Hall of Famer. Bernie Williams, who was a second ballot drop off, and Jim Rice, who is a Hall of Famer. So a lot more Hall of Famers in that group. Players between a 125 and 130 OPS plus in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. So yeah, I guess we kind of get into the case against and for Abreu.
I'll start with the case against him.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I mean, this is definitely much more of an intriguing case that a lot of people, I think, would have thought. I remember my senior year of high school after the election where Mariano Rivera went in and all those guys. The day after the election, Brian Kenny started making the case on MLB Network for Bobby Abreu. And I was like, all right, Brian, like pump the brakes here. Like I get analytics are the future, but like Bobby Abreu, like come on. And some of the things I was thinking was that he never finished in the top 5 in position player B WAR, and he only finished in the top 10 5 times, which isn't that much if we're looking at a Hall of Fame standard here. He never finished in the top 5 in OPS or OPS plus, and he only finished in the top 10 in OPS twice, and in the top 10 in OPS plus 3 times. And he was also kind of a liability on defense, negative 10.9 defensive WAR, and negative 141.3 defensive runs above average. So obviously, and he didn't make that big of a name for himself. He was never very marketable as a player. Like when he retired in 2014, it sort of went by the wayside, especially because Derek Jeter also retired that year. So that certainly didn't help. But regardless of that, I really didn't think much of Bobby Abreu. But then I learned about the case for him, and it is very interesting.
Yeah. And, I think, we have a lot more notes on the case for him, not necessarily saying that there is a better case for him, but the case against him, I think the numbers mean a lot more. Never being in the top 5 in B WAR, never being in the top 5 in OPS. That's a pretty big deal. However, I think what he was able to produce throughout the entire career, and how he kind of compared in his prime, also, it wasn't very bad when you consider also what he was able to do throughout his career. So he was top 5 in FWAR from 1998 to 2004. So in that 7-year stretch, he was a top 5 player in all of baseball among position players. And also from 1998 to 2009, 12 seasons, there were only 4 players in baseball with 12 800 plus OPS seasons. Those 4 players were Alex Rodriguez, who definitely would be a Hall of Famer, if not for steroids. Manny Ramirez, same thing as A-Rod. Chipper Jones, who was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and
With
Bobby Abreu.
97% of the vote. Yeah. And Bobby Abreu. I kind of cut that off, my bad.
Yeah, there's Bobby Abreu right in there. And also Bobby Abreu had 5 seasons with a 900 plus OPS and 25 plus stolen bases. 5 seasons, that's a good amount of seasons having such numbers. And those are tied for the second most such seasons in the live ball era. He's behind Barry Bonds and he's tied with Willie Mays. Not saying necessarily that he's as good as those 2 guys, which he definitely isn't, but in terms of offensive production from the batter's box and production on the bases, there is certain ways you can compare him to guys like that. Not a lot of guys were able to do it like Abreu did. And also, we're going to look at some pretty standard stats, nothing too complex about it. There are 20 players with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks. 20 players with those numbers, 2,400 plus hits and 1,400 plus walks. Bobby Abreu had 2,470 in terms of hits, 1,476 in terms of walks. 17 of those 20 other players are Hall of Famers. And the other 3 are Barry Bonds, who isn't in because of PED use, which that's what the writers view it on. And Pete Rose, who is banned from baseball.
Needs no introduction.
And Gary Sheffield, who we went over, would be a Hall of Famer already if not for steroid use because, 509 home runs and other things of that nature. But 20 other players, 17 are Hall of Famers, and the 3 others would be Hall of Famers if not for other things. That, of course.
Bobby Abreu.
Yeah, and then there's Bobby Abreu with the 2,400 plus hits and 1,400 plus walks. So, not saying he's necessarily as good as everyone on that list, but these are things to consider when you, of course, for all the BBWA writers listening to this. And there are 4 other players in baseball history, or I think it's the live ball era. I forgot to write. There are 4 other players, I think, in the live ball era with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks, and 400 plus stolen bases. Or actually, no, it's in baseball history. But yeah, in baseball history, there's only 4 other players with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks, and 400 plus stolen bases. Those guys are Joe Morgan, Ricky Henderson, Eddie Collins, and Barry Bonds. Obviously, only Bonds out of those 4 guys is not a Hall of Famer. And then if you want to say that, these filters are kind of
cherry picking,
nitpicky because Bobby Abreu, like, he barely got over those measures. If you drop those filters down to 2,300 plus hits, 1,300 plus walks, and 300 plus stolen bases, the only guys you're adding are Hall of Fame caliber, or guys with Hall of Fame caliber numbers. Tim Raines, who is a Hall of Famer, Alex Rodriguez definitely would be a Hall of Famer, or a future Hall of Famer if not for his history. Tris Speaker, Hall of Famer, and obviously Willie Mays is a Hall of Famer. Also, there's one other man in the live ball era with an 850 plus career OPS and 350 plus career stolen bases. That man is Barry Bonds, and definitely would be a Hall of Famer if not for his past. And there's plenty of other stuff to go over here. There's only 5 other men in the live ball era with 350 plus stolen bases and an OPS plus of 125 or better. Those 5 men are Rod Carew, Joe Morgan, Ricky Henderson, Barry Bonds, and Bobby Bonds. And Bobby Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame. However, Bobby Bonds had over 1,900 less plate appearances than Bobby Abreu did. He also had less wins above replacement and lower numbers in all slash line categories. So Abreu has the advantage there. There are also 21 other players. And yeah, what we have to mention is, Bobby Abreu, 395 career on base percentage is a big deal. Big deal. 395 on base percentage is a huge deal. And there are 21 other players in baseball history with a 390 plus career on base percentage in 10,000 plus plate appearances like Bobby Abreu had. 18 of those 21 are Hall of Famers, and the other 3 are Barry Bonds, Miguel Cabrera, who's currently in Major League Baseball, and Gary Sheffield. And I think the ultimate case with Bobby Abreu is, personally, in my opinion, I think he was kind of overshadowed by all the stars that played during his era. I mean, you think, the 1998 to 2004 when he peaked, there were a lot of other stars around.
Mm-hmm.
Barry Bonds, the most notable, and then more Hall of Fame caliber guys like, Andrew Jones, Todd Helton. And, a little bit before Abreu, there was Ken Griffey Jr., who kind of fell off when Abreu was starting to peak. And despite Abreu not finishing top 5 in a lot of these categories, it seems a lot of it was because there were so many great players. And if Abreu was playing in today's game, he probably would have been top 5 a lot of the times, and he'd probably be regarded to as one of the best players in the game. He'd be a top 10 player in the game for sure. And to prove that point that I'm making, a statistical analysis on kind of the eras, the 10-year period of 1995 to 2004 had 8 players with 50 plus F4. 8 players had 50 plus F4 between 95 and 2004. And the 10-year period before that, 85 to 94, had 4 such players, half as many players with 50 plus F4. And the 10-year period after 95 to 04, 05 to 2014 only had 3 such players. So Abreu probably would have been looked at differently had he played in a different era. And a lot of it was because guys were on performance enhancing drugs. And if you're someone that puts performance enhancing drugs against a certain player in the era that Abreu was playing in, then I think you should be a big Bobby Abreu fan, because I don't think he's ever been accused with steroids, and if he has, it's only been kind of rumors, nothing really confirmed. So so you have that. And one last stat we have for Bobby Abreu is Abreu and Bobby Bonds are the only players in Major League Baseball with 200 plus homers, 400 plus stolen bases, and an 850 plus OPS. So, Abreu, I think, definitely should be getting more consideration. I can't really tell you right now whether I will be putting him on the ballot or not. What are your thoughts on it?
As of right now, I do hope that he gets more consideration. I do want him to stay on the ballot because he is certainly someone I would absolutely vote for in a given year. I just don't know if I'm ready to do it this year. Um, I think I have 9 spots made up in my mind, and Abreu is one of the guys fighting for that 10th spot. So I certainly would love to see him stay on the ballot because, like I just mentioned, I definitely will vote for him at some point, assuming he stays on. I just am not quite sure if I'm ready this year, but I could be. And if I vote for him, I definitely would be confident in it.
Yeah, because I mean, like if he's in a different era, and that's the weird thing with the Hall of Fame is you're only allowed to have 10 guys on a ballot, but especially like when we're doing an era where most of these guys played in the mid 90s to early 2000s, there were a lot of great players during that time, so fitting 10 on one ballot might be a challenge, and Abreu might be getting left off because of that reason, so kind of puts people in a bit of a complex.
I think he would be getting a lot more consideration if he, was on some better teams. And I know that's not really much of his control, but he came to a lot of teams before and or after they were good. Like he left the Phillies, I believe after 05, they later won in 08. He left the Yankees after 08, they later won in 09. He joined the Angels. I mean, it was a lot later, but he joined the Angels after they won. Like he was on a lot of teams that went to the playoffs but didn't get very far. They're just flat out didn't go to the playoffs. He finished his career with the Mets in 2014 before they were, the year before they went to the World Series. So a lot of the teams he was on was sort of bad timing with how good they were. And I think that's a lot of the reason why he gets overshadowed. But if you're, I mean, I can't imagine there's any baseball writers listening to this, but if you are, please give Bobby Abreu some consideration at the very least because he deserves it.
Yeah, because I think immediately when someone mentions Bobby Abreu and Hall of Fame, everyone just kind of rolls their eyes at it.
Yeah,
But
like can you picture? I mean, I think it's a lot of it's like imagine walking through Cooperstown. You see, Babe Ruth, you see Stan Musial, you see Joe Morgan, and you see Bobby Abreu. It does look a little weird, but I think the eye test is stupid in a lot of scenarios, and I think that there is a legitimate case to be made for Bobby Abreu.
yeah, I mean, if you just kind of put the numbers in front of somebody and didn't attach a face to,
I was gonna say if you did like a player A and player B type of thing.
and it's hard to compare him to a lot of guys. I think Bobby Bonds is actually a very good comparison, although
He's not a
Abreu
Hall of
did produce almost like 4 seasons worth more of plate appearances, so he gets the nod in terms of that. And I'm trying to think like who else would compare it to, because he's like his ability to produce at the plate and on the bases, it wasn't really seen that much, especially in his era. It was like there was a lot of power hitting in his era, but there wasn't a lot of like guys who also were able to steal bases.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like because when he was getting good, Bonds had sort of stopped with his base running ability, and became only known for his hitting. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of guys doing what he did. And like if he had the 128 OPS plus but didn't have the 400 stolen bases and had more like 100 stolen bases, I'm probably not considering him at all. But because, he had that ability to steal bases and make a difference on the bases, I think there's a big consideration. And got on base almost 40% of the time, 395 on base percentage in 10,000 plate appearances. Pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's our that's the bubble case for Bobby Abreu. We both really can't tell you where our thoughts are on him, except for what we just told you.